You know the scene, right? A wedding, a big New Year's party, maybe just a dinner with friends. Someone picks up a glass, raises it high, and like clockwork, everyone else follows suit. It's this universal thing we all do. But have you ever actually stopped to wonder why? Where did this come from, and why on earth do we call it by the same name as a piece of bread?
I mean, seriously, think about it for a second. The word is, well, it's kind of weird, isn't it? We're holding a glass full of liquid, but we call the act a toast. You know, like the crispy, buttery thing you have for breakfast. So, what in the world is the connection there?
Yep, you heard that right. The tradition we all know today, with champagne or wine or whatever, gets its name from an old custom where people would drop an actual, literal piece of burnt bread into their drink. I know, it sounds totally bizarre, but that little piece of bread is the surprising key to the whole story. Okay, so to really get this, we've got to do a little detective work. We're going to trace the English word all the way back to its roots and figure out how a simple breakfast food got so tangled up with one of our most important social rituals. So get this, both the food and the gesture come from the exact same Latin word, toastus. It basically means scorched or burned. Now, that makes perfect sense for a piece of bread, right? You scorch it. But it's also a huge clue that points us to that ancient practice that gave the whole celebration its name.
The Romans actually called it panis siccus, or just dry bread. And they had some really practical reasons for plunking it into their wine. See, Roman wine could be really strong, super acidic stuff, so the bread would soak some of that up and make it taste better. It also worked like a little sponge for any gross sediment at the bottom of the cup. But it wasn't just practical, it was also symbolic. It was a way of wishing someone good health.
But here's where it gets really wild. This whole connection to bread, that's pretty much just an English language thing. If you hop over to Spain, for example, the word is brindis, and its origin story has absolutely nothing to do with bread. It's a completely different tale. So believe it or not, the word brindis actually comes from German soldiers way back in the 1500s. When they wanted to honor someone or celebrate a win, they'd raise their cups and say, "Bring dears," which just means, "I offer it to you." It was all about respect and loyalty. And somehow, that phrase got picked up in Spain and became the word they use today. Okay, so we've covered the words, but the actual ritual of raising and clinking glasses, oh, that's way older, and the theories behind it are a whole lot more dramatic. We're talking about everything from praying to the gods to, well, not getting murdered. So there are basically a few big theories about where the physical act comes from. One is all about sacred offerings, another is based on good old-fashioned paranoia, and a third is just about pure sensory experience. Let's break them down. First up, the sacred theory. In a ton of ancient cultures, people would perform something called a libation. That's when you pour out a little of your drink, some precious wine or honey, as an offering for the gods or for the dead. You were basically making a trade, a little bit of your drink in exchange for a wish. And what was that wish? Often, it was something like, "To your health." Sound familiar? And then there's the much darker theory, the one born out of pure paranoia. See, back in places like ancient Rome, poisoning your enemies was a totally legitimate strategy. So a host might slam their cup against their guests, hard enough for the wine to splash from one cup to the other. It was this dramatic show of trust, basically saying, "See, we're drinking the same stuff. If it's poisoned, we both go down." So, after all that dramatic history, we've ended up with the modern toast we know today. But have you ever really thought about what we're doing when we raise our glasses? Turns out, it's not random at all. It's actually a pretty structured three-part ritual. Okay, walk through it with me. First, there's the verbal wish. One person speaks up and gives a reason. To the happy couple. Then comes part two, the group agreement. That's when everyone raises their glass, maybe clinks them, and makes some noise to show they're on board. And finally, part three, the symbolic drink. We all take a sip together to basically seal the deal and make the wish official. So that basic structure is pretty much everywhere, but this is where it gets really fun. Different cultures all over the world have added their own unique rules and traditions, and they tell you so much about their history. For example, if you're ever in Hungary, pro tip, do not toast with beer. It's seen as a huge insult because Austrian generals famously clinked their beer mugs to celebrate after they crushed a Hungarian revolt in the 1800s. Meanwhile, in Georgia, toasts are a legitimate art form. A toastmaster called a tamada will deliver these long, beautiful poetic speeches. And in Chile, a brindis can also be a type of popular poetry that's recited before a traditional dance. How cool is that? Okay, so we've journeyed through history.
through different languages all across the globe. So, what have we really learned? When you boil it all down, what is a toast really? At the end of the day, it's about so much more than just the words or the drink in the glass. It's a ritual of connection. It's like hitting a pause button on everything else that's going on. So for just one moment, everyone can share the same good thought, the same wish. So whether the original goal was to get a blessing from a god, to prove you weren't an assassin, or just to make some gnarly wine taste a little better, the theme underneath has always been the same. It's about bringing people together and sharing a moment of goodwill. And that kind of leaves us with one final thought. In our modern world, which is so full of texts and video calls and digital everything, what are the simple physical rituals that still has the power to stop us in our tracks and actually connect us person to person in a real shared moment? Something to think about the next time you raise a glass. Cheers.